Today we're going to give you some insight in the complex market of occupational healthcare, and we're going to give you some insights in how to choose wisely in that complex market, and help you through some facts, figures, examples, client cases, and now hopefully you'll get inspired and know by this afternoon how to choose your interventions in this great business.
That's the goal. And what are we talking about? So let's get on the same page and give it a definition about what occupational health care is. Well, the definition we use in this presentation at our world is that it means specialist healthcare services focused on work-related healthcare that aim to prevent sickness or limit absence and increase productivity. Okay? So that's the definition we use in this presentation.
And then the agenda of today, we have three parts. The first part is based on a survey and a research that we have that GFK has done for us. Wouter has the book here. Welcome, sir.
Sorry to be late.
That research was finished only a few weeks ago, but it gives us some insights, and one of them is that only a few companies put serious thought into choosing occupational health care because it's rather complex, as you will see later on. In the second part, we show you the market. We show you that there is plenty of choice, and so that it's difficult to choose. And in the third part, we get the theory together and transform that to practice. So what do we do by clients, and how can CZ help you choose the right interventions and everything that's around it? I told you about the research, and it shows us three important themes. And the first theme is that there is limited insights in today's health risks and tomorrow's trends. And we also see that there is a difference between how employers look at these insights and how employees see them. So these two parties are a little bit, they're not together. So that's an issue and a theme. There are some questions about responsibilities for health risks. Who is responsible? And if you know who's responsible, how do you take notice of these risks? And if you've taken notice of them, how do you discuss them? And the third theme is the limited insights into how to deploy interventions. And if you've deployed interventions, how do you evaluate them and how do you finance the interventions? Yes, I think it's about time to start with the questions. And the first question we have for you is, how many providers does your organization use? Do you know that? May I ask you? Do you know?
Sure, many.
How many?
I work for many corporations.
Yes. Okay. And you also have a lot of providers. Do you have a number approximately?
About 5.
5 providers. Okay. And how is that for you?
Yeah, I think
At least 5. Okay. Well, Wouter, what have we found out?
Well, the research, 5. That sounds familiar. What we found out in the research that over 60% has a fixed provider network, which still means that 1 out of 3 companies does not have a fixed provider network. So when something happens, they just choose a specialist provider that comes around. Okay. So, but if the companies that do have a fixed provider network, on average they use some 5 providers. So that sounds familiar. We know for you. Huh? Okay.
Well, that 55%, that seems a lot, Wouter. But is that 5? Is that enough?
Is that enough? Well, if we ask here the audience, maybe it is not, or it sounds familiar. But in our opinion, of course, there is this broad variety of problems that can occur, issues that can occur with your working staff. So, well, we will talk about that later on about all the risks that can occur, of course. So, you can ask yourself if 5 providers is really enough to deal with all the problems that can occur with the working staff. We will get to that later on. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The second question, how many interventions do you use on an annual basis? Sir, do you know that of your company? How many interventions do you use?
Well, we actually, we're an organization in the middle where we make or create possibilities for people that have cancer to go to a oncology physio or whatever is needed.
Yes.
So
Okay. So you're an organization that develops.
Very bad example.
Above average.
Well, not average, but working with CZ, with the National Police,
Yes.
I'm a very good example of how things can work.
How good it can
Yeah.
work? Yes.
But maybe you missed my presentation a little early this morning because I mentioned that.
Okay.
Oh.
We did actually. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
even mentioned CZ as a party and a very important party
For the national
in
Yeah.
that deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Maybe, can I ask you, madam, how many interventions do you use on an annual basis? Do you know that?
Yeah, we have 5 major programs.
5 major programs, yes.
For the rest, I didn't count it, but the big figure we have 5.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Wouter?
Yeah, the answer from the research we conducted, that there is a very limited insight really into quantity. If you ask organizations how many interventions do you deploy, well, most of the time, or not all the time, they know the right answer. They just don't know because they do not have a fixed target, so to say, how many interventions to deploy on an annual basis. So there is really very limited insight into how many interventions are being used. If you ask, and this comes for all the organizations from corporate to mid-market to smaller organizations, an average of 37 interventions per year is mentioned. And well, is this too few? Is this good enough? We will mention a client case later on, Fokker, an aviation company that has 5,000 people in the working staff, and they last year, 2017, they used 100 interventions, and that was the target. The target for this year to come, of course, is a bit higher. But to give you some feeling, so to say, about how many interventions are being deployed in organizations of, well, in this case, the Fokker case, 5,000.
Is it weird to set a target?
Yes, it seems weird, but
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah. Yeah, the funny thing is, of course, that it wouldn't be any good if 0 interventions were.
No. But
yeah, so
given the number of 5,000 employees there, I would say that figure should be far higher.
far higher. Yeah.
Yes, and what they saw, but Wouter will tell it later on in that case, is that there was no occurrence, I don't know if that's the right English word, but with the HR of the possibilities of interventions.
Yeah.
So that's why they set a goal, and they put that goal a little bit higher every year. And now you see in the organizations that it's coming to a flow, and that people realize that interventions can help in a lot of stages for the employees.
It wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah.
Because by interventions you mean as from a consult with the arbor doctor up to a more specialized intervention, like
yeah.
a rhythm program or
For example, yeah, it might be
Yes.
disco or mental or whatever is needed. Yeah, that's our definition of
so it's
intervention.
very broad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very broad, but also in the prevention side. So
Yeah.
before they see a doctor,
Yeah.
or before the employee is sick. Yes.
Or it could be a strategic goal you would like to set if it's a merger or an acquisition and you want your sick leave to drop from 13 to 5.0.
Yeah.
That's a very strategic goal
Yes.
to set. And within that range of from doctors up to being terminated, that's
Sure, I was just wondering about
But I'm
let's go.
let's call
Yes.
let's call it like it is.
That's a broad range.
I can imagine. Yes.
That's a good example.
Let's call it like it is.
Yeah, but I will mention that when we talk about Fokker, because talking about mergers and acquisitions, that's a big deal as well. Okay.
We have another question.
Yeah.
Do you have insight in costs? Does anybody have insight in costs of the interventions?
Especially if you don't do any interventions.
Yeah.
Those costs rise very quickly, very
Yes.
fast, per minute,
Yeah.
per day, per hour, per week, per month.
That's an even better approach, really.
Yeah. That should be an approach. But what does the investigation say about it?
Yeah, well, maybe it's not surprising if we look at your reactions, but less than half the organizations have insight into costs of interventions used. And only 2 out of 10 mid-market companies have a fixed budget for interventions. And in the corporate market, it's a bit more. It's 3 out of 10 companies have a fixed budget for interventions that they deploy. And that's a funny thing. Nobody knows how much it costs, and nobody knows what the price of the different providers is. So if you take supplier A, B, or C, we know that there is a huge difference. There can be a huge difference in the price range from all the different propositions of the suppliers. But well, it's not taken into account by most of the companies, really. So price is, well, it doesn't seem that important, actually.
And in your experience with your clients, who determines the budget?
Well, I assume that most of you get it your HR, and there is, of course, most of the time this battle going on between HR and the finance department, because most of the time the finance department gives the money or the budget to deploy the interventions, and the money is being spent by HR, and the expertise, so to say, most of the time is with the HR department, and they know or should know best how to use the money best, better than the finance department. So most of the time when we talk with our clients, we notice that there is this battle or discussion going on between the finance department, who gives the money, and the HR department, who has the expertise to deploy the interventions. Okay. Does that sound familiar? Not for you, I see.
Depends. Most corporate finance departments take over HR.
Yeah.
Because, HR has to get savvy with numbers. They have to explain. So, yes, that's the classical approach. But that was like 10 to 20 years ago, I think. And now it's a whole different ballgame. You have to know your numbers. You have to know what the doctor's visit costs. What does it cost? Is it a half hour? Is it an hour? Etc. And if you have one person or you have 5,000 people, you have an average of what's going on in your organization. So I say I base my thesis on strategic issues.
Okay.
You have a workforce, you have major illnesses or health issues. You try and tackle them by bringing the costs, what it would take. So it's a different approach. I would
And what type of organization you work for?
Management.
Okay.
Interim management. So I'm talking from a different perspective. Different.
Yeah, I understand. You should.
So I'm bringing in a lot of cases, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be a fine example for many corporations.
Okay.
Act like this.
Yes.
It would be a fine example.
Yeah. In our experience with our clients, it's not the norm, so to say.
Yeah.
But that's why HR is being kicked out of the boardroom, because the numbers.
Yeah, we should bring a calculator really next time. Okay, well, thank you. Take care. Thank you.
And then at last, what's the insight into the quality of intervention and the differences in quality of interventions? Well, that's another question. Maybe we should go straight to the answer.
Yes.
Because
yes, over 50% do not have insight into quality whatsoever. Okay, and of course it's a wise thing first to define what is quality. Really. What is quality when deploying an intervention? Well, Peter mentioned already the different perspective from employee and employer. An employee, we found out, what is quality for an employee if the appointment for the intervention is being made rather rapidly, and if the doctor or the receptionist is a friend, things like that. Okay, and of course the employer thinks it more important. Does my employee return to the workforce as soon as possible, and is the issue really taken care of? So there are different perspectives when you look at quality. And of course, we have our own perspective as well. When we talk about interventions, we like to take into account if it's an evidence-based intervention. And evidence-based means that there is scientific research proof that it does work. Okay, and there is a lot of different perspective or different ideas when we talk about this. Because, for example, mindfulness. Do you think mindfulness is evidence-based or not? Is it?
Yeah. Partially.
Partially, yeah. Well, it is, yeah. And yeah, there is scientific proof that mindfulness is evidence-based intervention, so that it does work. But holistic tree hugging, so to say, is not, of course. And there are a lot of different examples. But only 1 out of 3 interventions is evidence-based. And we like to put people preferably to evidence-based interventions, because then you know there is some sign of quality in there. Okay.
One out of 10 organizations chooses evidence-based. So
yeah,
if you put put all the percentage on 1 out of 3, the numbers are very limited. Yeah.
Can I ask, do you take it into account if it's an evidence-based intervention? Or,
Well, yes, I do hope so. We do look at what kind of intervention an employee would like to have or to follow. What kind of program is it? What is the goal? And is there within the company enough faith in that could help the employee to return to work?
Okay, so you do take it into account and you consider it. Okay, that's good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda.
The next, how does the market looks like? We've done some investigations. Again, we put it all together in this book. If you would like to have the book, you can go downstairs at the CZ, and we have an example for you.
It is in Dutch, so it might be a challenge for some.
Yes. Choosing is difficult. How come? Well, first of all, the market is very young. You can see it on the left side. Only 10% of the companies exist longer than 15 years. So there's not a lot of experience in the market. The market is very young, very fast growing. And if you look at the right side, there's a lot of diversity in terms of providers. Approximately 65% is in occupational healthcare services. Some work regional, others work nationwide. A very small part international. But also the form of the company is very different. 30% is self-employed. Others have a few employees, and a very small percentage has over 50 employees. So the companies are very different. Market is growing. That makes it, complex, challenging, yes. But we see a shift. And that shift goes from traditional and curative medicine, companies that focus on curative healthcare, use traditional healthcare professionals, and have no or limited online services. That was how it was. And for some companies it still is, but we see a shift to companies that also focus on innovation, nearly 70% of the prevention companies offer one form of prevention. So that number is growing, and that's a good sign. But if there are coming more intervention, it doesn't simplify the market. So we thought about something, as he said.
Yeah, of course. What we did is we divided this market, so to say, into some segments, and we detected some 10 segments, and there are some differences to be made. As you take pictures of the slides, I'm informed that after 2 weeks on the website, all the presentations will be there. So you still can take on the
website of the
yeah.
City, so you can
still
get
take
all
pictures if you
the.
want. So we divided the market in a couple of segments, and there are first of all the difference between specialists and all-rounders. So we have these all-rounders, and they say they do pretty much everything. Okay, they are good at really everything. Doesn't matter if it's physical or mental, they do it all. Okay, and then you have the specialists, and the specialists they focus on a special segment of interventions. For example, of course, you see on the right-hand side, mental specialists. 20% of all the providers we categorize in the mental specialist corner, so to say. And it's not surprising, of course, because the biggest risk for all the workforce, the work staff, is mental issues, really, work stress-related, etc. And second, we have the regular physical specialists. Okay, so all the things that can occur to your body and have to be taken care of as an employee. You go to the regular physical specialist, and then we have some vitality specialists. They focus on lifestyle issues, etc., etc. And we have some reintegration specialists as well, over 10%. That we know well for decades, really, because that's what we came from, so to say, from the curation corner. Okay, and as they've already mentioned, we see the shift from curation to prevention. Okay, so this is the way we segmented the market to get a better insight into the market, and we needed some insight into the market, because what is the market? Well, it's rather diverse and complex and hard to see through, because we have these 10 segments, and we talk about over 800 providers on the market of occupational health care. And these 800 providers, they offer over 4,000 interventions. So, well, that, in our opinion, it's rather complex, because if we step into your shoes as HR specialist or whatever, what do you do? How do you choose? That is, of course, the biggest challenge. Okay, from this market, how do you know what is any good? Who should I choose, and what intervention they offer, and what is good regarding quality and price, etc. Okay. So choosing is, of course, complicated because of the lack of transparency. If you go to the websites and all the information that is provided, you will see a lot about what they can do, and what you will not see most of the time is how much will it cost. Okay, what is the price of the propositions, the interventions they offer? And we talked about quality already. Well, it's very hard to define quality from the information that is offered from the providers, let alone compare the quality and the price. And what we noticed as well is that most of the providers, they target a broad market. They do not focus on certain segments, certain industries or something, but they try to do pretty much everything for anybody. Okay, so that makes it hard as well. And the quality guarantees are very unclear. We see these quality labels and professional associations, etc., that, well, if you look at it, then it pretends that it's, of course, very good because they are organized within this organization, but how should you know, really, based on what kind of information, if this quality label really represents quality, and what is quality, really?
Yeah. Yes. Difficult.
Yeah, you have a difficult job, we know.
Yeah. Well, we hope to offer you a solution, because we've heard a lot of problems and complexity, but we hope we offer you a solution. We've developed 5 principles. And that 5 principles we put together in an online intervention. Help me out, how do you call that? Application, yes, yeah. I think an application. Yes, it is. And that's based on these 5 principles. The first one, choose a provider that's based on their specialism. I always take myself, for example, in regular healthcare. If I have a problem with my knee or something, which doctor would I choose? Would I choose a doctor that sees 3 knees a year? Or would I choose a doctor that has a specialism in knees? Well, I think I would go to the second. And that also works effectively for the occupational healthcare services. The second, be aware of the stage of the employee's condition. I take an example for someone who has already called himself sick, or herself. Or do you have an employee that comes to you and says, well, I don't sleep as well. I'm very busy at work. I can't sleep. I love my job. I want to do it, but it's very much. How do I keep in balance? But he doesn't report sick. Both employees need a different approach and can have a different intervention so that they can recover at the pace that's best for them. The third, prioritize evidence-based interventions. Well, Wouter has discussed that already earlier. I think that's clear. 30% is evidence-based of the offered interventions, but only 1 out of 10 that is chosen is based on evidence-based. Yeah. So we can improve at that point. The fourth, choose based on quality and obtain clarity on quality in your company. The figures I will tell you are also, you can read them in the investigation. 75% of the employers choose an interventions only on the result. Is that employee coming back in time and is he cured? 60% only look at the experience of the employee. And the time frame is also important for the employers. So does the intervention fit in the time frame that the employer thinks is important? Obvious and important, but and then I take the step to number 5, also involve the employee and the context when you're choosing. Another example, maybe if you are a pilot and you need physiotherapy, but you're flying intercontinental. How are you going to do that? That's a different question, and it needs a different intervention than when you're an employee and you work in a plant in the place where you live, and you can go to the physiotherapist around the corner at your house. So that's difficult.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest outtakes we got for you.
Yes.
It really matters if you're working as, I don't know, a software engineer with TomTom, or a pilot, or I don't know, a fireman, or something like that. So you really have to take into account the context from the employee if the intervention will be effective for any movement.
Yes.
It's tailor-made.
Yes, and these 5 principles are just put together in the application we've developed, in which you can also put some own providers. So if you work with a provider that is that you feel comfortable with, or you work with for your company, we can put that provider in the application as well.
I think we have to wrap it up.
Do we have to wrap it up?
Already.
Yeah, we're
so
going.
We'll finish with
we'll finish in a few minutes. Yeah.
I promised you already. One of our partners, really clients, partners, is Fokker. Fokker is used to be Dutch heritage, of course, aviation building company. Now it's part of GKN Aerospace, and GKN has been in a hostile takeover from Melrose, really. So, an investment firm. Mandela, I think. Yeah. So lots of things going on at Fokker. Over 5,000 employees work there, and not just because of the hostile takeover whatsoever, but because there's always lots of things going on. The work stress is the #1 risk for the workforce of Fokker. Reorganization was a continued process, so to say. They are all the time in reorganization, job insecurity. And if you go to a Fokker plant, you will see a blue-collar worker, male, over 50 years old, poor lifestyle. So that's the picture really that you see. Okay, so at one of the plants they had 4 burnout cases in the first quarter of last year. So they reached out to us and asked us for help really. So what can you do to prevent people from falling into a burnout? And what we did first was take a look at the market, the intervention market for work stress. We found out that there are over 450 providers just for work stress alone. And it goes from lifestyle coach to regular psychologist to reintegration specialist, etc., etc. And altogether they offer over 2,000 interventions just for work stress related issues. Okay, so we understood that Fokker found it hard to find the right providers and the right interventions to deal with the mental issues from the workforce. So what we did is we designed the employee's work stress journey. Well, journey sounds like a holiday, but the journey means that it goes from prevention to reporting sick to reintegration. There are various stages that an employee goes through before he makes the call or sends the WhatsApp, or I don't know in what way you can report sick in organizations like Fokker. But there is a lot going on before someone reports sick, and we help them to understand how to deploy preventive interventions before someone reported sick with a burnout or things like that. Okay, so what we help them to have a training for all the team managers to learn and understand what signals you can find before someone is really reporting sick. Okay, so sometimes people sleep bad, they react in a cynical way, are more quiet than they used to be. All signals like this that you can find out as a team manager to, in a preventive way, prevent people from falling ill or even worse, have a burnout and then need to be reintegrated. So this way we find out that we really can help organizations like Fokker to prevent people from falling ill with mental issues. And what we see now is that there is a lot more interventions are being deployed, because last year we had more than 4 times more preventive interventions than we did in the year 2016. And a lot of them were on mental issues. So you mentioned, is it funny to put a target or a goal on interventions? Yeah, that's what Fokker did, but just because they wanted to deal with the problem and they wanted to be able to measure the things they are doing. And so far it's working well, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Great. But no, it's not just working stress that we can work with, Wouter, isn't it? We also do something on physical, if the presentation will work, hopefully. No, it doesn't.
Not with this button, it does.
No.
My stress level
is... yes, there he was.
He was.
There he was. One way back. Yes. We also do something at PostNL, and that's physical health. I will make it short. PostNL is a very large company in the Netherlands which works at different regions. And that regions all work in their own way. So what we did is we took a little bit of advantage in that. So we started analyzing the physical situation, and we saw a rising absent rate. There were some lifestyle issues, and there were mixed feelings about vitality and the relationships between PostNL and the employees. What we did is we work with Gardien. I will show you in the movie later. We started small. We started in one region, and there we saw that it worked. PostNL was enthusiastic, the region was enthusiastic, and the employees were enthusiastic.